started. Good evening, Brian. Good evening, Diane. How's everyone doing?
Doing great, Sean. Thank you.
First weekend of February. Here it was freezing cold yesterday. Our high was 44 for about an hour. And today it was a bit warmer with a high of around 52. And I know you all are experiencing similar conditions out at the coast.
That's still above the NICA threshold of 40 degrees. So
yeah, we actually didn't have practice on Saturday because where we were going to be practicing in Wilson's Creek, you can pretty much figure that the temperatures are going to be 4 to 6 degrees cooler. So we just said, no, it's not a big enough chance. And so we asked everybody to work out indoors. Hopefully they did. But we did go ride out there today, and I saw some of our team out there riding with their families, which was really cool.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of our teams on social media doing those indoor practices you described, right, Sean? They found a gym or they're getting in a spin class, so they're getting the work in, even when it's cold out.
Yeah, we've been just hitting the middle school library and doing body weight workouts and things like that. We don't have the ability to do spin bikes or anything of that nature. So, but it's all good. Get the heart pumping, get the muscles working. Everything's good.
Well, that's a good thing. We are just a month from the first race weekend, Sean.
Exactly. And that was the alert that I sent yesterday when we canceled practice. I said, you need to be doing something because there's 4 weekends till the first race. And that's definitely something that I think motivates some of our student athletes. It's hard for them sometimes to realize that racing really is just right around the corner. And that's, I think, driven home by the fact that race registration is now open for all of our races. And that sort of hits close to home. So race registration and grit registration for every event is open. And I've had a couple of questions about the state championships, and kind of a reminder to everyone that we've decided that that's going to be just an open race. There's no qualifications, and that anyone who wants to register can register. So if a student athlete wants to go in and register for all 6 races this season, they can go ahead and do that now. And that's totally open until remind me, is it the Sunday or the Monday of the race weekend?
Yeah, Sunday? No, great point. It is the Monday prior to and I'll talk about event weekend here in a minute. But so, for example, for Browns Creek, 4 and 5 March, so the 5th of March is our race day. 27 February, that Monday, 11:59 p.m. registration will close for Browns Creek. Or Cranking at the Creek, as we've announced this week, our new race venue names. Cranking at the Creek.
Cranking at the Creek. All right. And I think, everyone's familiar with that registration process, and just for those few of you that haven't heard any of the other podcasts, or maybe caught it in the coaches' emails or any of that communication, there are no registration caps. So there's no need to jump on and register for all the races. Like, you register as you go is fine, and you are going to be able to race. So just keep that in mind, that you don't need to try and beat some sort of race cap.
Yeah, and just the point I want to make about, I've started calling really our weekends event weekends, Sean, because you already mentioned we have the grit program on Saturdays. We are going to incorporate a bit of adventure activities into our event weekends. We'll have that information out in the race flyers. We've got a couple surprises in store towards the end of the season. So really, it's a big event for the league. Race is obviously the focus for us so much, but I've started just using the term event weekend because there's so much we're trying to offer for our teams and families out there during the weekend.
Excellent. And I think the new thing for this season is this home team concept. And we've brought on the mastermind, really, I think, behind this, Diane LeBlanc, to help walk us through the home team volunteer registration, what this means for those teams designated as home teams for those races, and any other information to help this be as successful as I know it's going to be. So, Diane, I think now is a good time for you to sort of like give your elevator pitch and let us know what it is that you're really envision for this home team program.
Okay, well, thanks, Sean, so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about home teams and what we're doing that's very new this year. So all of our teams let me back up a minute. This actually was a Brian Russell idea. Apparently, this is something that they did in a league in Maryland that he was with, and so we have had some real difficulty filling our volunteer spots at our race weekends. And so just, this is my second year as the coordinator, and what can we do to up our game and ensure that we have the volunteers that we need to do the race weekend? Because without our volunteers, our races just wouldn't go smooth like they do. So each of the teams, Sean, have been assigned to one of the race weekends. So that posting of all of those teams has gone out twice. Brian Russell, our league director, has sent that out to the head coaches and the team directors. So they need to make sure that they are checking their email to see which race weekend is the one that they have been assigned to be a home team. What we're looking for with our home team, Sean, is that we, depending on the size of the team, obviously, we're really hoping that we're going to get at least 10 volunteers from each team for the race weekend. I will tell you that I completed putting all of the volunteer assignments in, and I want to talk about that a little bit more in a couple minutes, Sean, if that's okay. But right now we have 226 volunteer spots for Browns Creek. So, and it's going to be, our average last year was probably, I think the most we needed might have been like 176. So we've really upped our game. The reason why is because one of the comments that we got a lot last year, Sean, was that the shifts for volunteers could be a little lengthy. And so parents come, they want to volunteer, but they want to watch their student race. They want to be at the staging area when they're getting ready to start. So, we took all of those comments in mind. It was like, wow, what's the best way we can do this? And so I was like, wow, we need to think about doing 3 shifts, maybe more, depending on what the volunteer spot is. So the reason why we're at 226 is because we've added additional shifts so that the shift that each person has to volunteer is not as long as they were in the past. So it's more, we're trying to practice radical hospitality, I guess is a good way to put it, when it comes to our volunteers, because some of the volunteer positions are a little bit more difficult. And we just want to make sure that our volunteers understand that they are appreciated and that we need their help, and we value the time that they choose to support our race weekend the way they do.
One of the questions that's come up has been, can I guess, solicit volunteers from my local community, from some sort of organization that has volunteerism as part of it? And that's something that I just want to remind everyone that volunteers of that nature on race weekends are covered under the league's liability. So it's not up to the individual team to secure that that kind of liability or waiver, anything like that. That's something the league does on race weekends. And we've done that all along because we would have parents that would volunteer that were not licensed coaches or things like that. So we can definitely accommodate that. Is that correct, Diane?
That is absolutely correct. There will be a link with the sign up where individuals can sign a waiver. We absolutely have to have that waiver signed. If they're already a NICA coach, then that obviously the background check, all of that's been done, but there is a waiver that we need to have signed by anyone else that volunteers that is not a NICA coach. And the other thing I'll say about that too, Sean, and that's a great statement, good question, is that there are certain volunteer spots that have been set aside for our coaches just because of the scope of the volunteer work that they do. But as far as the community, it's a great way, inviting other groups in your community to come and help volunteer. Holy cow, what a great way for the community to see what NICA is all about, to get excited about what we do in the state of North Carolina and across the country, and just to get a feel for why there's so much excitement and enthusiasm with the North Carolina Interscholastic Cycling League. So it's just a great opportunity. Just come and see.
And I would think, honestly, if you're pitching this idea to a local cycling club or something like that, it really is a way of like getting adult cyclists out to see the enthusiasm that kids have in cycling. So this next generation of cyclists, and help enable that, help to encourage it, and help these kids to see that there is a place for them in cycling after they leave NICA, that there's more beyond this world than just this one little blip of middle school and high school participation in mountain biking.
Absolutely. One other thing I want to add to, Sean, is that we're in Eastern North Carolina, and so we're part of Down East Cyclists here in Jacksonville. The largest part of our cycling community here in Jacksonville are road riders. So we're like, we need to get the roadies out to Browns Creek because we want them to see what we do. I agree with that whole ideology of helping people to see what middle school and high schoolers are doing. I mean, our students are so passionate about not even so much racing, just being there, just that sense of community, just being on their bikes, doing the mountain bike thing. It's awesome. And so it needs to be shared.
100%. Well, is there anything else that we need to know about this as we kind of wrap up this idea of the home team?
So I will say, yes. So home teams are going to be the first to be able to sign up for volunteer positions. That's one of the specifications that I wanted to make sure that we put into place, because they are committed to helping with that particular race weekend. Unlike last season, I do want to mention this, Sean, unlike last season where all of the races were posted, and people could, at the beginning of the season, people could sign up for volunteer positions for every race weekend. That will not be possible this year, because we have added something in the signup.com so that I'm able to open up those volunteer registrations for the home teams in a time frame, so that they are the only ones that will be able to sign up. So if you have coaches and you have parents that are just really jazzed about, there's like some volunteer spot that they really, really like, my encouragement would be that we're really grateful for that enthusiasm. And we want to make sure that those volunteer spots are available to everybody, because that was another thing that we ran into last year, was we would have the same people volunteer for that same spot for the entire season. And so it kind of closed it out for other people. And we just want everybody to be able to experience what we have to offer, Sean, on the weekend, not just showing up and cheering your team on, but come and help us make this happen. And Sean, that's the last thing I want to say. Truly, there are certain things that we call mission critical when it comes to pulling a race off. And if those volunteer spots are not filled, we cannot hold the race. And so, again, we can't make this happen without our volunteers. We appreciate them. If they volunteer, we provide a meal for them. We provide lunch for them for that day. So, it's all worth it. We love meeting everybody that likes to come and volunteer, and we just invite everyone to participate. If they have any questions, Sean, they can reach out to me. I'm Diane at NorthCarolinaMTV.com. I will be more than happy to answer any questions that they have. I'm here to do whatever I can to encourage people to volunteer. Myself and my assistant, Jenny Wood. I need to say that too. She is my assistant. Couldn't do it without her. So yeah, thanks, Sean.
Yeah, no problem. And just a couple of things I really want to stress, like you said, this is mission critical. And we did have some race holds last season where we just couldn't start a race because we didn't have enough volunteers in place. And one of those issues is people signing up to volunteer and then not showing up for the start of their shift, and us having to sort of find them and get them, for whatever reason, they got involved in something else, or they just missed when they were supposed to be there. So it's very important that if someone signs up, they understand that they are a very critical piece of the race weekend, and that they are arriving and checking in on time and being at their post in the time that they need to be in order for everything to fall into place. It's a big giant machine with a lot of moving parts, and getting all of those parts in sync and meshing is key to us having a successful race weekend. But it's also going to be very key for us this season, because as we're about to talk about, Brian, we've got a lot of stuff going on with this wave schedule. And so any little thing that doesn't fall into place can cascade throughout that and really have a detrimental effect to the day. And with that, I think it's a perfect time for us to start talking about the wave schedule, Brian. So let's hear what you got.
Can I add a couple more things on volunteers? Because I can't finish the podcast without thanking Diane and thanking Jenny for putting this concept into place. One, you're exactly right. We need it. We need the volunteers to come. Exactly right. We run our races and events a little bit differently than maybe other organizations do. We need those parking volunteers to fit all of the 1,000+ cars that are coming to the weekend. We need staging volunteers to handle the 600, 700 racers we're going to have for the weekend. We need those course marshals out there to make sure our folks are staying safe. So absolutely mission critical. And it does simplify the management for us a little bit. Instead of Diane having to track down maybe 62 head coaches to find volunteers on Sunday morning, we're going to look at the home teams, just 10 to help us fill maybe some of those no-shows that don't show up. So it simplified the management approach. It's absolutely critical. And Diane, I appreciate what you're doing with the home teams. Before we move to the wave schedule, Diane, keep me honest here. Some incentives for folks that come up and volunteer. We will recognize the top 5 individuals at the end of the season, the most hours for volunteers. What I will do is give them pit zone credit for next season, $25 in your pit zone for doing a lot of volunteer work for us. Whether you're a coach or a parent, we'll give you some credit. Top 5 teams, we'll give some type of team award, thinking a flag you can hang in your pit zone for really doing well on the volunteer side of things. And then Sean, you and I talked about this, and I think Ryan Donnell suggested this. 2 times field credit for our coaches. If you're doing those marshal sweep positions we're asking for coaches for, we'll give you field credit ×2 towards your coaching requirements. And then Diane, I think if we've got the Uber volunteer that volunteers 3 or more races, they get one of our nice league t-shirts. Is that about right?
Absolutely. That's correct, Brian. Yep.
Okay, so there we go. So we do appreciate everyone putting in the work and helping us with volunteer spots. Hopefully, I think part of our idea of home teams is we are asking those home teams just to really focus on one race, and then maybe you get to spend the rest of the races going out to watch your kid and managing the team and the like. So hopefully that simplifies a little bit. What I will do just in terms of information sharing, tomorrow I will put the link on the website under our event weekend where you find the races to what the home teams are. Diane, thanks for coordinating that. We moved some of the teams around per their suggestions, but I'll put that on the website so everyone sees what their upcoming home team assignments are. And then for Browns Creek or Cranking at the Creek, I will email those home teams tomorrow with the volunteer sign up link So the time this podcast is coming out, those home teams will have that volunteer link. And when we release the race flyer, about a week later, all the other teams will have access to the volunteer sign up. So I think that's the way ahead for our volunteers.
Well, it wouldn't be a well-placed segue into the next segment without you stepping back and talking about what we just talked about. I've started to notice that I never can set you up right. I've got to work on that.
I always have something else to say. It's like I'm jotting notes down as we go, and it's like, I don't want to forget that. And I'll say that here's the segue, and that's why I closed on it, Sean. Is I have heard from team directors and head coaches about how we're communicating across the league, and some are podcast listeners, some are Facebook watchers, some are email watchers, and we're trying to get the information out in a lot of various forms. We're doing our best to get that information out to people. So yeah, I will do my best to make sure the information we're talking here on the podcast is also followed up on an email or followed up on the Facebook page and the like. I just want to let folks know I'm sensitive to that, that type of communication.
And I'm sensitive to the length of the email. I remember that the emails they were so long, and it was easy to just be like, this is just too long. I can't read all this. I can't go all the way to the end. And so I've made it a point to really try to strip down the coach's email to just the bare basics of what we talk about on the podcast, and maybe add a little bit more detail, but nothing more, so that it is very easy to digest, and it doesn't take a huge amount of time to kind of work your way through. And that's not where the important thing can get buried or lost. And that's been a conscious effort on my part this season, as well as, having everyone kind of well-informed going into the coaches calls. And that's one thing that, I'm concerned about a little bit. And coaches will email me with questions, and their questions I recognize as being things that we've discussed on the podcast. It's gone out in a coach's email, and we've discussed it on a coach's call. So those are the three primary forms of communication that we have. And it's really important that our coaches, especially our head coaches and our team directors, are engaging in one of those so that they're getting critical information. Would you agree, Brian?
I would. I think it's certainly important as we approach our event weekends, and that's a really good segue, because so much of the information about that weekend is going to be in the flyer. And back to Cranking at the Creek, I've got 11 February in my head as when we will post that flyer on the website, and that will be available for review and discussion at the next coaches call that you host, Sean. So well in advance of whatever the event weekend is, we will have that flyer posted, and that is the best source of information about what's going on for that upcoming weekend to talk about.
So I think this is a good spot for us to sort of work on what we want to approach with wave schedules. And so I think there's two big kind of concepts that we need to preface this discussion with, and that is, one, accommodating every student athlete that registers for a race and how that's going to look in the wave schedule. And two, this concept of time on course and what that means for how we look at number of laps and things like that for our student athletes. So how do you want to start this whole discussion of wave schedules off? Like what do you think is the best approach?
I think let me start with where I started anyway, and then kind of as we peeled the onion back with the staff for the past several weeks, those other topics you just mentioned that kind of got uncovered, and like how are we really doing it as a league. So really what prompted it was, taking a hard look at the schedule on Sunday. Where are big numbers? And so we decided, when I think we announced this in the last podcast, Sean, no course inspection on Sunday morning. So to get your course inspection in, got to come on Saturday, because we need that extra time to accommodate our bigger fields. And everyone will see this in the event flyer, but we will start about the normal time on Sundays with an 8:00 coaches meeting. We need you talk about information sharing, Sean, and okay, 8:00 Sunday morning coaches meeting. And right now, per the schedule, We will start staging at 8:45, and the first wave goes out at 9 o'clock, and we will start with middle school again. And so we're starting a little bit earlier just to accommodate our big numbers. And so the big change for this season is that for all of our middle school boy categories, not 7A or 8A, I'm talking the regular middle school boy categories, boys freshman and boys JV1, we will run 2 fields in that category. We have, last time we counted, Sean, over 100 registered in each of those categories. Historically, 70% will register for a race. That launching a category of 70 riders from the start into the single track is not the best idea. So we are going to divide those categories into 2 fields. We will race them apart. They will be separated by time. You will see that on the wave schedule, but we will score them together. And that's the big change for this season in terms of the schedules. Separate fields in the same category. Again, middle school boys, JV1 boys, and freshman boys will have probably 2 fields in them for our race days on Sunday. Race separately, one right behind the other, scored together. So both fields competing for the podium on there. And that's just going to take more time. And for Browns Creek, we have extended the day a little bit, putting more time between those fields just to make sure we reduce some passing opportunities. So pretty long day, but Browns Creek is one of our shorter duration courses. So we have the time to do it. So that's kind of the scene setter for us, that we took a look at big fields and how we manage that. And that really caused us next, Sean, to take a look at course duration, to fit all that in and the certain number of laps and times and the like. And just my takeaway, please jump in on this, is I think we just need a holistic look as a league as to what our category criteria are, the duration, which seems to me the overarching guidance for our race courses. There is NICA guidance in the handbook. You can look in chapter 6. And right now, our league guidance that we've used for the past several seasons seems to be off of that. We've exceeded it in some categories. It's different in other categories. And so for this season, when, again, people will see this in the flyer when we put it out, we have modified our race duration guidance for all of our categories based on, if there's good news about all of this, we're going back to the same race courses we were last season. We have good data. Kudos to Jim Otto on our scoring team for looking at all the data from last season. And we have probably more appropriate race duration times for our categories that are going to probably enable more student athletes to finish their race and not get pulled at the earned lap cutoff time. I recognize that was an issue last season. So let me pause there, Sean, because that was a lot just for you to weigh in on either the big fields or the race duration we've modified.
Well, I think the first thing is sort of us to really kind of explain a little bit about this separate but together racing that we're looking at. So let's say I am starting in the second field and my race time, I end up getting scored in the top 10 of the category. My next race, then I will get called up in the first category, in the first wave, because I would be sitting in 10th. Is that a good kind of understanding of what's going on?
That's a real good understanding. And I've got the draft document that I think we'll get out and share before the next coaches call, so we can walk everyone through this. But yes, the other big change for this season is we are essentially ranking all of our categories, and we're going to put them into the starting chute in that ranked order. So essentially, yes, faster riders up front to get them out ahead and reduce the passing opportunities. But for the multiple field categories, you're exactly right. Those fields will be split based on their ranking from any known data. First race, we've got to go on last season's results. And so we have to randomize the no data riders, so to speak. But yes, after the first race, we're going off race results to rank you in your category. And so typically, yes, Sean, field 1 in the same category will be the faster riders than field 2.
And I think the other thing to kind of talk about is this idea that because of being pressed for time and us wanting to be efficient, we are deviating from the guidance in the NICA handbook per league director's discretion, which is always a handy little thing that can be done by the league director. And that is that we are any rider who we have race data from last season and therefore an overall ranking will essentially, it's not really a call up, it's just a seeding for everyone that has previously raced so that we can do that start shoot in a much more fast manner. So we will only have to do this random call up system for people that did not race last season. Is that a good understanding of that as well?
It's a good understanding, and our goal for this season, even for Browns Creek, is coaches will know that before race weekend. Thursday, Friday, before that race weekend, we will publish essentially the call-up order for each category. So you will know you can show up to the staging area, stand behind your team plaque, so to speak, in order. You know what the order is when your student athlete is going to get called up. And it's just going to make us more efficient. And again, it was for me primarily because of the big numbers, a safety consideration to get the faster riders up front and going.
And that's going to include those random call-ups as well, because there's no need for us to wait until right before the race to start doing the random call-ups. We're working on a system to where we'll have that random call-up kind of system set up so that there'll just be a start list that you're running down, and that will include everybody from those kids that have already raced to those kids that are racing for the first time and therefore falling in that random call up. They'll all be ranked and ready to go, and we'll just be calling names and lining everybody up.
That's exactly right. And so again, kudos to your council, the council of the staff, for just to let everyone know that the staff has been working on this the past 2 to 3 weeks to make sure we could do this appropriately, do it safely, and have it make sense to folks. So I've got, again, that draft document. We'll give that a turn across the staff, get that out to head coaches, and have a talk about that at the next coaches call. Make sure everyone's clear on how we're doing that.
Excellent. What else do we need to talk about with Wave?
That's a lot for one podcast, Sean. I think home teams and wave changes, league director discretion. Thank you, chief referee, for.
I think the only other thing is that everyone needs to anticipate that this is going to be a bit of a longer race day. There's going to be a bit more kind of going on. And so that's going to be important for everybody to understand, is that we're trying to minimize that by starting early, but we may be going a little bit later in the day too.
Yeah, I think Browns Creek will be long because we've got some greater separation between the categories and fields. Once we have data, we're shrinking those times between the fields. So we will save some time in subsequent races. But Browns Creek, yeah, that will be probably a pretty long day. But again, just to emphasize the flyer, we'll get a draft out here in the next week for Browns Creek, and then registration closes on that Monday. We know what our numbers are, and by the middle of that week, we'll have the updated flyer, the wave schedule for Sunday posted, and plenty of opportunity to ask questions about that headed into the weekend.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a pretty full podcast for leading up to the races. If there's nothing else to add, I guess we can start wrapping this up. What do you think?
I think that's about right. Do we start with our guest Diane? I think.
Well, I mean, I want to take a moment to just sort of, I know you guys kind of made fun of me on the past couple of calls because I was riding the trainer and things like that. And, I've been definitely heading into this season with a bit more focus and training in mind. And one of the things that I've added has been doing a lot more kind of working out during the day and during the mornings and things like that, not just riding, but off the bike stuff. And I added lunges, which is something that I've never really done before. I started doing a lot of lunges, and I realized it's a big step forward for me.
Who gets to go next after that one, John? Is it me or Diane?
Whoever wants to take that.
Diane, are you ready to go? That's a tough one to follow.
No, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, okay. I'll close this one out.
Yeah, hold on a minute. Sorry, I have to find my dad joke. Oh my god.
Oh, what are you Googling right now, Diane?
Why does a dad take an extra pair of socks when he goes to the golf course?
In case he gets a hole in one.
Ah,
Sean, you're on your game
is the dad.
tonight. That's right.
Good
Okay, well,
job, son.
simply because racing is obviously on our minds. Here's one. What did the nut say to the nut in front of him during the mountain bike race?
I have no idea.
I'm gonna catch you.
Oh my gosh. That's terrible.
Take that grid podcast. now that they've thrown down the gauntlet.
Yeah, and how exactly are we measuring that? What's going to be the metric for deciding? Because it can't be they get to decide whether we're better than them or not. Because I think that will that's obviously got some bias to it. Because
Well, we did okay on the race name poll. Maybe we need to put some of these out on the poll.
I mean, everybody knows we're better. We've been doing it longer, where some of us are actual dads.
Guys are legit.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's been a long weekend. It's been kind of a long night. I'm about to turn it into a pumpkin, but thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Yeah.